Well, hello, everyone. My name is Catherine McGarry, and I am the Mayor of the City of Cambridge and Chair of today's Council Workshop. The purpose of today's workshop is to hear feedback gathered throughout the Cambridge Connected project so far and discuss Council's priority areas for the 2020 to 2023 Corporate Strategic Plan. The city's strategic plan is important because it connects the community's vision and goals along with the corporate mission, values, and actions of the city. It guides our decision-making, helps us to direct tax dollars to community priorities, and allows the community to measure our progress. The city began the process of updating its plan in early 2020 prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. Ongoing work has continued throughout, adjusting to continue public engagement online and also to incorporate COVID-19 recovery action plans into the plan. It should be noted that this meeting is intended as a working session to discuss emerging themes and is an opportunity for Council to provide input into this process. The workshop is not about specific or targeted actions, but about overall direction and goals. The information that is gathered here today will be combined with other engagement feedback in order to develop goals and objectives, goals and objectives, which will be brought to Council for approval at the end of the year. As a reminder to members of Council and our guests, in the spirit of kindness and procedural rules, we will ask that we maintain decorum at all times throughout our meeting and remind members that using disrespectful language will not be tolerated. We will ask also that everyone listens respectfully as you would want to be listened to, and note that only directions to staff and motions to receive for information will be permitted at Council workshops. A reminder to everyone, please, to continue to stay safe and remain vigilant. Wash your hands, practice physical distancing, and wear your mask. We're excited to be here with you again, Cambridge, for this special Council workshop, and a reminder that we're all in this together and we all need to continue to do our part. So I'll now ask our clerk to complete a roll call of Council so that we can confirm everyone's attendance as we're coming to you electronically today. Madam Clerk?
Councillor Atshade.
Present.
Councillor Devine.
Present.
Councillor Mehta.
Present.
Councillor Hamilton.
Present.
Councillor Mann.
Present.
Councillor Reid.
Present.
Councillor Wolf.
Present.
Mayor McGarry.
Present.
And Councillor Liggett sends her regrets.
Thank you. In addition, we're going to take a moment to welcome the staff we have joining us today. And joining us electronically today, we have our City Manager, David Calder, our Deputy City Managers, Hardy Bromberg, Cheryl Zonleiter, Yogesh Shah, and Dave Bush. Our Director of Communications, Suzanne Hiller. Our Director of Corporate Strategy, Brooke Lambert. Our Strategic Initiatives and Policy Specialist, Nicole Drake. And clerking the meeting today, we have our City Clerk, Daniel Mountain, and our Deputy City Clerk, Jennifer Shaw. So we'll move ahead, members of Council, to declarations of pecuniary interest. At this time, now is the time to declare. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? And seeing none, we'll move ahead with our agenda. As today's meeting is a Council workshop, delegations will not be registered. We do, however, have guests with us this afternoon that have joined us and will be facilitating a portion of our meeting. Thank you to Chris Cummings. Give a bit of a wave there, Chris. There you go. And Rebecca Southerns, there's Rebecca, from Openly Inc. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome as well to Brooke Lambert, our Director of Corporate Strategy, to provide a brief overview and introduction of our work so far on the strategic plan and what our next steps will be. Welcome, Brooke. Go ahead now.
Thank you very much. So we have prepared a short presentation for you. Danielle, are you able to pull that up? Wonderful. Thank you, Mayor McGarry and members of council for taking the time to participate in this workshop today. My name is Brooke Lambert and I am the Director of Corporate Strategy. As you are aware, it is an extraordinary time to be leading the city's strategic planning process, but it is also very timely. Throughout this year, we've been able to engage with community, staff, and yourselves as we work to identify the strategic priorities for the city that will guide our work, including our pandemic recovery efforts in the coming years. I'm pleased to provide you with this brief background before introducing our consultants from Openly, who will facilitate today's session. Next slide, please. In 2016, Council adopted Cambridge Connected, Our Voice, Our Vision, a strategic plan for the 2016 to 2019 period. This four-year plan articulated the vision, mission, and values of the City of Cambridge and identified the longer-term strategic themes, goals, and objectives that have become central to our business planning processes. The vision, mission, and values are unchanged in this current update. Instead, our consultation is focused on updating our goals and objectives in Phase 2 and developing a detailed action and implementation plan in Phase 3. Next slide, please. We are fortunate that we started this project in January and we were able to engage with over 1,000 community members in Phase 1 before the pandemic impacted in-person consultation and engagement opportunities. We reported to Council on the results of Phase 1 in July. We also retained Openly Inc. to assist with the research and engagement facilitation for the strategic plan, and you will hear from them today. Phase 2, which is April to October, included, with Openly's assistance, beginning the research aspect of Phase 2, including reviewing approximately 40 city and community master plans and strategies, as well as all data gathered in Phase 1. Due to the pandemic, we adjusted our project timeline and paused community engagement activities until late August. But since that time, we have engaged over 300 people through online surveys and focus groups, and this engagement is ongoing. Further, consultation in November is planned once the draft goals and objectives are completed. We will then make adjustments as required and bring the goals and objectives to Council in December as part of our Phase 2 summary report. Next slide, please. Your participation throughout this project has been incredibly important. The strategic plan is rooted in the priorities of the community and Council and helps inform the city's activities on an ongoing basis. In October 2019, we held an initial planning workshop to discuss your priorities and frame the approach for this project. In December 2019, Council approved the staff report outlining the scope and timing for the strategic plan update. On March 9th, 2020, we held the first Council workshop, an interactive session where we reviewed the previous goals and identified current and future priorities. And in July 2020, Council received a report on the Phase 1 results. Your feedback at that meeting has informed the ongoing consultation that we are working on now. This workshop is the next step in this process. Unfortunately, we can't meet in person at this time, but if you have any additional concerns or comments, you are welcome to share them with us at any time. Next slide, please. The purpose of today's workshop is to share the emerging themes and get your input in order to focus our goals and objectives for the next 2 to 3 years. Your feedback will be combined with input from other key stakeholder groups, community and corporate administration to create draft goals and objectives. As I mentioned, additional community and staff engagement on the draft goals and objectives will take place in November, and the Phase 2 report will go to Council in December for decision before we proceed with developing actions and implementation in Phase 3 in the first quarter of 2021. And with that, it is now my pleasure to introduce Rebecca Southerns, working with Openly Inc., who will lead you through today's discussion. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Brooke. I appreciate that. So I hope that that context setting piece will help you kind of set the stage for what we're going to do today. And my job will be to elicit your input in a pretty structured way over the next hour and a half or so. And so what we'll be doing is presenting back to you some of what we've heard and asking for your input step by step on chunks of that, that feedback. So please understand that what you're seeing right now is draft and is representative of our most recent round of feedback. So what I'm going to do, if it's okay for me to share my screen, I think the host has enabled me to do so. I just want to make sure, yes. So you will see I'm hoping that you can see. Are you able to see my slides now? Are you able to see a red slide? No, not yet. Okay. let me
Not
try
just
again. All right, let me try one more time.
There, you've got it.
Is that better? All right, there we go. Thank you. So we're calling these sense-making sessions. And so what we've done is we have met with a variety of folks across a variety of platforms and then done it again in a sense. And that second round of feedback is to take what we heard initially and show people kind of all at once what we heard across a variety of sources and ask for them to help us make sense of it. As opposed to Chris and I going off somewhere with Brooke and Nicole and us figuring this out, we're inviting those same important stakeholders to help us make sense of what we're hearing. And that's really what today is about with council. And so what that involves for today specifically is that we would like to invite you to help us interpret and extend beyond what we've heard now from three main sources that have various parts inside them. One was that we had 5 community panels with community experts across different parts of the community. So we looked at the previous structure of the plan, people, place, prosperity, and we invited people to participate in that way. So we had one group in one of the P's and 2 in the others, and it resulted in 5 community panels. We've then asked them for their feedback on the combined work that they did together, as I mentioned, in that double process. We've also received input from residents in a couple of different ways, mostly in what you would be familiar with as the forum research, the telephone poll that was done across the city earlier this year. So we've taken that piece, and then we've taken more recent input from residents that has come through your Engage Cambridge platform in a variety of ways and incorporated that into today's input. And then roughly 70 city staff have participated also in various ways, including in a focus group that we conducted, but also in various ways internally to give their feedback on the plan. So this is kind of the data set really that we're looking at today, and we're interested in your feedback. So again, it is a draft way of making sense of what we've heard. One of the pieces that came that was presented to these folks for their consideration were these goals. And you'll see that this is reflective of those same 3 P's, people, place, prosperity, with a new one added called public value. So the draft goals, in some cases through Engagement HQ or with the staff, were presented to the public or the staff and used as the basis for feedback. What do you think of this? What do you think of that? That kind of thing. So we wanted to make sure that you'd seen those draft goals, because we're going to talk to you today about how they have evolved over time. But initially, you'll see here that the people goal was framed as actively encourage, inform, and create opportunities for people to participate in community building and make strong connections. The prosperity goal was to support and encourage the growth of a highly competitive local economy where there's opportunity for everyone to contribute and succeed. In terms of place, take care of, celebrate, and promote the great features of Cambridge that we love and mean the most to us. And then the public value piece, which really has to do with value for tax dollars and providing excellent service. It has to do with, in all actions, create maximum public value through engaging, sustainable, transparent, and collaborative stewardship of shared resources. So we're not actually surprisingly going to ask you to comment on these so much today because things have moved on from here, but I wanted you to see that shared starting point initially. And as I said, we offered these up as kind of drafts for people to comment. And some of what we heard was general support for the overall themes, but people were also saying, you know, what's not to like? There's nothing particularly contentious or specific enough here for us to really sink our teeth into it. There were comments that things were feeling still a little bit vague. And so where things ended up heading from that point was that people said, you know, we don't really want you to focus on the center, that public value thing right in the middle. We actually want you to focus where those 3 P areas intersect: people, place, prosperity, and all of it is done in a way that provides good, solid public value for people. So as we began to figure out those areas that actually were the highest leverage places where people, place, and prosperity all came together, that's where we found ourselves getting into the content that I'm going to show you today. So that's really the background that led us to this place. So we've now worked with this a bit and have 4 different priorities that we'd love to have you give us your input on. And I'm going to ask you to comment on them generally first, all 4. I'm going to show you them in a moment. And then we're going to dive into each of the 4. And then we're going to zoom back out to some more general questions about, if the strategy took on this kind of flavor, how would that be? So here's where we're at. You'll notice that these are considerably more specific, but they still have kind of a general flavor to them. And I'll explain them because they don't stand alone for sure. The first one is a broad category around changing the Cambridge narrative. And we may eventually choose to frame even the wording of this in a more affirmative way. But I wanted to give you the idea. And that is that we are seeing across the data sets that people are not speaking well of their city to the extent that you would probably want them to. There's a kind of a thread of concern about divisiveness, about seeing Cambridge as 3 separate communities still, despite 40 years or whatever of amalgamation, about people seeing Cambridge as a place that they speak more negatively of than positively. And you would have seen this initially in the net promoter scores that were presented to you in the forum research, where Cambridge was scoring noticeably below a benchmark of an industry standard across comparable municipalities. And we certainly then heard it in the community panels, for example. But the good news of this story is that there's a huge opportunity to turn that narrative around, and also more notably for the city to be the leader in doing so. So we're going to dig into that a little more. The second one is around a sense of belonging. This has a very broad sense of welcome and of people feeling like they are from Cambridge, whether they have lived there a short time or a long time. It also has to do with focusing on people who live there as a decision, perhaps instead of, or at least before, focusing on tourism, for example, because we heard from our tourism folks that a place needs to be amazing for the people who live there in order to attract tourists. And so that's the overall frame of the belonging one, with a couple of notable highlights within it. And those are mental health and addictions and homelessness and affordable housing. Those 2 areas nested inside number 2 here came up very prominently, particularly in the community feedback. So through your community panels, through the Engage Cambridge, also in the community input into the forum research, mental health and addiction supports and supports for those experiencing homelessness are very high priorities for your residents right now. The third priority that is emerging was the idea of having revitalized downtown cores, plural, and that those cores need to be connected through transit, through traffic that moves well. And this strong sense of place and placemaking is really important here. And then finally, the last category here is a broad one around environmental protection. Sometimes that has to do with climate change. Other times it had to do with making sustainable choices more broadly. Sometimes it's really specific around flood protection, stormwater management, that kind of thing. So broadly speaking, these are the categories in which people's feedback is coming. And so what I'd like to do first, before we dig into any of these individually, is to invite you in the chat to just make any comments that you might have around this. If you have questions, if you're surprised at anything, just any sort of initial, okay, here we are. All right, I got my head around this. So any comments in the chat that you have, and also if you have any questions that we need to pause and answer at this point, we certainly can do that before we dig into the details. If anyone would be more comfortable speaking rather than typing, you're certainly welcome to unmute yourself, and we'll have time for a couple of comments here.
All right. I have a comment.
Thank you, Councillor Reed.
Under the strong sense of belonging, I think there's a feeling of divisiveness within the community that somehow or another we need to deal with. People have different ideas of how to bring that sense of belonging to the city.
Thank you for that. And we certainly would say that at the moment, from what we've heard, what you've commented around divisiveness would find its way potentially into that second priority, but also into the first.
Yes.
In terms of feeling, people talk about silos, people talk about separate communities, that kind of thing. I see Councillor Mann commenting that maybe a sense of competitiveness, certainly between the three cores and maybe even at the ward level. See a comment here about the online narrative in closed Facebook sites might be driving the narrative in other echo chambers. So other comments around that's just in your general thing. Councillor Hamilton, I see your hand.
I just had a question about how the data was sampled. Because I know that I think there were telephone calls made to thousands of Cambridge residents, but I know I was just wondering the average age of people sampled, and also whether or not there was any attention paid to whether or not these are long-term residents or residents that had just entered Cambridge through the push we're seeing from the GTA. So I don't know if you could call people on cell phones or if the data was primarily collected through home phones, which would imply people had been here for a longer period of time, that would be more familiar with the classic Cambridge divisions. But just the types of people answering these questions, if you could give us the backstory, that'd be great.
The quick version of the backstory is that the forum research was conducted by Forum, the company. So I can't tease apart the absolute details of it, but what I can tell you is my experience. I know the sample size, and I know they were asking some demographic questions. Whether they cross-reference those answers with, or the demographics with specific answers, I didn't see that level of depth in the materials that I was provided, but there may be deeper levels of that. Certainly I can tell you that 400 people were in the survey, which is considered a statistically significant number for a phone-based survey for a community of Cambridge's size, with just under 5% margin of error. But we are noticing across all kinds of polling, as you've rightly noted, that to the extent they rely on landlines, they are attracting a different demographic than those that rely on cell phones, which obviously is increasingly most of the population. And I don't actually know that particular answer. Chris, if you happen to know it or can find it, we can certainly cycle back to it. But they are weighted by age and gender to accurately reflect the demographics of Cambridge as reported in the 2016 census. So you can hear in that both an effort to be representative and the weaknesses of the fact that we only get census data every once in a while. So we had 400 people in the forum research. So that was the randomized representative sample. Then we had another 252 responses to a community survey inside Engage Cambridge. So those are people that chose to come to that site to answer that survey, as opposed to being randomly elicited or solicited at their dinner table or wherever. Then we had 44 people participate in the expert panels, which would be people that were identified by city staff and ourselves who are known to be community leaders in the spaces of people, place, and prosperity. And then we had 70 staff. So there wasn't, I would say that there has been a rigorous, but not necessarily, certainly not as rigorous as a randomized sample weighting of comments. And so where the comments really diverge, I'm going to do my best to say to you, we heard this from the community, but not from the staff, or we heard this in this source, but not in this other one. On the whole, my sense as someone with a research background is that the feedback was remarkably consistent. So that's why you won't hear me specifying actual channels very often. We've tried to combine them here.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. I'm seeing some other comments here about being weighted demographically. Land and cell phones had an equal chance. Thanks for that, Nicole. Sort of where they live within the community, how long they've lived here. I see that from Councillor Mann and Councillor Urbetta talking about working on the identity for the city as a whole. Yeah, so these are the kinds of things that are coming up. And so what I'd like to do is bring us to allow us to zero in a little bit here. Councillor Reid's noting that the 3 BIAs are now working much more together, and that did certainly come up. So let's dive in to each one, and then I want to give you an opportunity to comment on these. You'll see on the right-hand side of these slides that I've given you just a couple of little examples of where some of this came from. NPS on the right side of this slide stands for Net Promoter Score. If you've got questions about that, I'm happy to answer them. But I've framed these as if they were an emerging strategy. So they're framed in aspirational terms. If you were to change the Cambridge narrative so that Cambridge becomes positive and hopeful, emphasizing good news. You can hear in that people are saying, we need some good news right now. Could the city take some leadership in privileging and moving forward the good news stories in Cambridge? There are lots of them. We need to hear them more. Could we promote a more unified message, as in we are all in this together, as in we are one city? There's a sense in which Cambridge is stuck in an old story. And so the unstuck part came from saying, from people who are new here and longtime residents here both, saying, I don't want to hear about what happened in the early 1970s. I want to hear about where we're going now. And therefore would love to see an openness to change, and that Cambridge becomes and is a city where people want to live. They're not in Cambridge just temporarily before they move on. They're not in Cambridge because they can't find anywhere else they can afford. They're choosing to be there because it's a great place to be, and that people inside and outside the city speak well of it. And so this first priority is a bit more about, I don't know, reputation messaging than it is about concrete, bricks and mortar kinds of initiatives. But I'm curious, as you look at this, I'd love a bit of feedback, both in the chat and orally. How does this resonate for you? What do you think? Does it feel true? Does it feel like a worthwhile priority for council?
If I may weigh in, Rebecca,
Mhm.
it's Mayor McGarry.
Thank you.
I think you really hit the nail on the head from things that I've been hearing as well. I have the advantage of representing Cambridge, not just within the region, but really across the province in a number of different tables that I sit at as the city mayor. And that would include AMO, the Association of the Municipalities of Ontario. We sit on Ontario Big City Mayors with 30 of the big city mayors that represent about 70% of Ontario's residents. And Cambridge is actually a leader in a lot of different scenarios. We have great economic development strengths, diversity in our workforce, and it's interesting to me that the online narrative and closed Facebook groups have actually changed the narrative from where we're actually at. Waterloo Region, and that includes Cambridge, is one of the top growing municipalities across Canada. We're one of the top economic engines of the province of Ontario and therefore Canada. We have an incredible, diverse array of industries, of businesses, of citizens, and we're incredibly well placed when it comes to just even where we are geographically in the province, close to the GTHA, close to the US borders. So we have a huge amount going for us. So it is disheartening when many of our citizens tend to converse with each other and close Facebook sites that are echo chambers and don't sort of see the bigger picture. And it is a challenge for us as a city, for us as a region, in today's media market where the traditional media outlets are not used as much or even looked at as much by our citizens. And so a couple of these comments here, Cambridge loves to hate on Cambridge, can be true. And yet the reality is we're one of the best municipalities in Ontario to settle in and to live in. We have a huge amount going for us. And as a matter of fact, we have weathered some of the economic storm caused by the pandemic better than many other municipalities. So I think although this does ring true, I think the narrative is actually out of sync with the reality of the economic position of Cambridge, with how other municipalities, other jurisdictions within and with outside Canada's opinion is, and that we are still attracting a good number of businesses and companies to come and settle here, which really gives us a very strong future. So I think that with looking at changing the Cambridge narrative, I think what I would like to see is that we change the Cambridge narrative to be realistic. And the realistic situation is that, yes, we do have some social issues that are experienced by all other municipalities across Ontario. But we do have some great news here, and changing that Cambridge narrative is certainly something that we're all trying to experience, because we do have good, positive, hopeful news, and we're weathering our storm. And I'm touching wood when I say this, better than some other municipalities. We have great diversity. We have a fantastic system of government, not just here in Cambridge, but with our regional, provincial, and federal partnerships. We're innovative, and so we have a lot of good news stories. And I am positive and hopeful that with this workshop today and with a changing of the narrative, Cambridge residents will actually see and believe that we are in one of the best municipalities across Ontario in order to live and raise a family and work in.
Great. Thank you very much for that. Councillor Devine, I see your hand up. You're next. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd just like to speak about two things, the narrative and social media, and something that you yourself said, Rebecca. Social media can be very toxic, very poisonous. And to be quite honest, if you let it get to you, it will get you. All right. And I've said this, been saying this for years. If you have difficulty with social media, then don't look at it. Just plain don't look at it. Right? If it bothers you that much, just plain don't look at it. Because you have a bunch of like-minded people that are out in left field. I call them lunatic fringe. Okay, the lunatic fringe, all of these like-minded people that are just they just want to crucify somebody for something. And as far as the narrative go, let's talk about Galt, Preston, Hesper, and Blair. That was many years ago. It was through the various governments, a shotgun wedding. And there are people that refer to themselves as living in a certain area, but if you take Toronto, for example, that's been amalgamated. People say to them, "Where do you live?" "I live in Toronto." "Oh, where do you live?" "Well, I live in Etobicoke, I live in Weston, or I live in Cabbagetown, or I live in Rexdale, or I live in Downsview. If you take a look at Kitchener, which has never been amalgamated, well, with the exception, I think they threw Bridgeport in with it one time. People talk about, they say, "I'm from Kitchener. Where do you live?" "Well, I live West Heights, Laurentian Hills, Chicopee." So, I don't get too wound up about the Galt, Preston, Hesper thing. It's just, if somebody says to me, "Where are you from Cambridge?" "Oh, whereabouts in Cambridge?" "Well, I live in Hesper." Okay, so I don't see that as being a negative, to be honest with you. Okay, and certainly we can't change history, but I see it as being a positive. And we've got three different areas of the community that are quite unique to one another, architecturally, structurally, environmentally. So I think that's just a huge positive. And like Councillor Reid said, we have now the BIAs are starting to work together, which is something that's only recently happened. So I'm not too worried about that aspect. But what I am very worried about as a councillor, we have all this information that we had pre-COVID, and now the world has changed with COVID. And there are people that in this community, because of the fact that, by virtue of the fact they're not working, there's going to be a lot of people lose their homes. So I think the whole future of this whole process. I think we got to stop and smell the roses and say, let's put the brakes on it, or at least slow it down, because this is a long way from over. And the Shangri-La that we might have had in last November, December, January, February is not here. It's not there now. It is certainly not here now. There's people that are hurting very, very seriously. Have trouble paying the water bill, their hydro bill, sewage bill, mortgage. So I think we just need to stop and smell the roses a little bit before we get all excited here. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Is there anyone else that would like to say anything about the priorities, this particular priority around changing the Cambridge narrative? Does it feel like it resonates? Does it feel like it's not as high priority as some of the other things that you would prefer to see in the plan? What are you thinking? I'll put it back up for you to look at. I can't see all of you in one screen. So I see some hands up though. Awesome. So we'll go Councillor Wolf, then Hamilton, then Mann.
Well, first of all, I would like to say that I agree with everything that's pretty well been said. And, but I don't think this is a number one priority, as Councillor Devine has said. Right now with the pandemic, we need to concentrate on some other things. And I found it interesting when I went door to door in my ward, people were generally happy. Very few people had complaints. People were happy to live here and proud to live here. So sometimes it's the squeaky wheel that you hear, and often it's the complaints. But I do think that we could maybe improve or expand our communication department to get more of the good news stories out. And one thing is that Cambridge is a very generous community, and in terms of the pandemic, there are a lot of good news stories where people are looking after each other. People buy groceries for people. We make phone calls to people that are isolated. If you're in need in Cambridge, people come to your aid. So that story needs to get out. But as Councillor Devine has said, perhaps this isn't our priority at the moment.
Great, thanks very much for that. Councillor Hamilton.
Yeah, thank you very much for this, Rebecca. Echoing Councillor Devine and Councillor Wolf, I think there are some very serious issues right now that COVID is revealing. Economically, culturally, I mean, people are going to be really stressed out financially and also mentally with a lot of the anxieties that are coming to the fore. But I think what social media does in terms of the narrative is that the danger is in amplification. So with something like Facebook, you amplify what are and can be very legitimate voices and concerns, but they're amplified to a level where you can think they're the majority of, let's say, Cambridge, when in fact they're just a very vocal minority. But once you get online, that amplification can come from a variety of different directions, and it's tough to tell what's what. It gets picked up from the media, broadcast around. It can be very deceiving. So I think I'll echo what Councillor Wolf said, in that I'm sitting here because I was just in a by-election, and I did a lot of door knocking, like thousands of doors over about 10 months. COVID really put a stop to a lot of the door knocking, but there was really a lot of positivity. There was a lot of energy. People were really engaged. They were excited to be here. And of course, there are always those concerns, but they were few and far between compared to people that had really passionate, a passionate excitement over living in the city. So I think that's the narrative that we need to start amplifying more. Part of it, I think, is that you mentioned all those problems that you revealed in your study, from mental health to addictions to homelessness, the opioid crisis. The difficulty is, and maybe this ties into the communications, that those are extremely complex problems, right? And I always say, be very wary of easy answers to complex problems. And online on social media, it's very easy for someone to give a simple negative answer to a complex problem that garners a lot of support. It's very difficult to get a complex answer to a complex problem out there communicated effectively, even though it might be the correct one. So that's something I think the city can and should work on in the future. That's going to help change that narrative. We do have some huge, serious problems coming up, but I think it's a matter of boiling down that complexity to be a little bit more digestible for everyone across the town. And that's really going to go a long way, and it's going to channel a lot of the positivity and energy that I think we all know and we all feel is there. We just need to bring it to the fore a bit more effectively.
Thank you for that. Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Rebecca. And the comments that I've heard so far have been great, and a lot of them that I may have repeated myself. But when you look at Cambridge, and Councillor Devine has talked about Galt, Preston, and Hespeler, but you look at Cambridge, and we have transitioned from what used to be a textile and a millwright community, whether it be Galt, Preston, or Hespeler. The whole community has transitioned from a textile industry to innovation and technology. I think that's something we've done together as a community, whether it be Galt, Preston, or Hespeler. And one of the things that really ties us or unites us is the river. The river runs through us, and the river unites us, whether it's the speed that joins the Grand in Preston, it starts in Hespeler, joins the Grand in Preston and flows into Galt. The river unites us. And, when we communicate about issues or things that happen in Cambridge, we usually hear about the bad things because bad things are sensational, and that's what gets people excited. And we need to talk about the good news stories, and we need to talk about the good news stories that occur throughout our community. And it's important that we maintain the identity of what Galt, Preston, and Hespeler is, but we still have to emphasize that we're Cambridge. And the uniqueness of Cambridge is that we do have 3 individual communities that came together to form Cambridge. And now the strength of Cambridge is those 3 communities coming together. Those good news stories have to come out as we come up to our 50th anniversary of being Cambridge. Those are the things that we really need to emphasize. And at the same time, we can't lose track of the things that have been said about the issues and the very important issues that are on the horizon. We still have the pandemic to deal with. We have the opioid crisis to deal with. We have the homelessness and mental health issues. We have to maintain and make sure we don't lose sight of that, and at the same time try to celebrate the good things in this community.
Thanks very much. What I'd like to do is carry on this conversation, please, but continue into what has been captured in the second priority, because I think some of it reflects what has already been said. So let's dig into this a little further. In this priority area, the aspiration would sound something like this. Cambridge is carrying toward its most vulnerable, particularly those experiencing homelessness, addiction, and/or mental health challenges. Cambridge is affordable to live. Cambridge is known for strong neighborhood level connections, and Cambridge is welcoming to newcomers. So you can hear there that there are different elements to this: mental health and addictions challenges, homelessness challenges, and affordable housing challenges as related but separate. The importance of the neighborhood level work that your city has invested in for many years, and also this idea of people who are arriving in Cambridge, whether that be from the GTA or from the globe, feel like they are from here, feel that they are welcome here. And so those are really the elements that have emerged in this particular category. And I'm curious if you could give us some feedback on this, both in the chat and out loud like we did before. If you want to speak, you're welcome to either say something out loud or put your hand up in the participant list.
Where?
Councillor Devine, go ahead.
Sorry, this is all about timing. Just hang on, I'll get my headset on. This whole thing here, create a strong sense of belonging. I mean, that's clearly important. That's very, very important. And I don't think there's too many people come into our community that are not welcomed. Very, very few that I know of. But the one thing that really stands out here to me is affordable to live. Affordable to live. The price of homes and rent in Cambridge in probably the last year has gone up exponentially. It's gone up a lot, and it's fine for us that own homes. But the people that are coming here now are going to be struggling more to purchase a home. Rent has escalated considerably, and there's very, very low cost housing. Very, very low cost housing. So again, this is kind of a timing issue. We have created a sense of belonging, but affordable to live. I'm not so much thinking it is so much anymore.
Okay. Can I just clarify so that I understand the time?
Yeah.
Can you say more about the timing issue?
Sure, last like when was this? When were these comments taken?
Anything from the most recent, sorry, the longest ago was February and the most recent was maybe 3 weeks ago.
Well, it's changed a lot since February. It changed a huge amount. Like since this situation has happened with COVID. I don't know where you live, where your background is.
I live in Guelph.
Okay, well, Guelph's been okay. So Guelph's about the same position we're in, with people working out of their homes now in the GTA, and a lot of people feel this is going to remain there for some time. If you talk to most real estate people, anything within 100 kilometers of the GTA is going up, and GTA is leveling off.
Okay, so thank you. I understood. I wanted to make sure that the timing was perhaps COVID related. Thank you.
That's the timing.
Okay.
That is the timing.
All right. Thanks for that. I'll take
you.
Councillor Reid and then Mayor McGarry, please.
Thank you very much. I really wanted to talk about our most vulnerable people, because we kind of stalled on welcoming her vulnerable people and finding solutions. And I think that being stalled at a certain level has created a problem for us in that we haven't been able to solve. And so that's something I think we need to get at right away, is how we're going to deal with and I know it's very complex problems of homelessness and addiction and mental illness, but it's something that I feel very strongly about, that we need to do something probably immediately, and then long-term solutions. But the immediate solutions are, we have people vulnerable on the street with no showers, no public toilets, and no way to really look after themselves well. So those are some immediate concerns that I have that I think need to address.
Thanks very much. Over to you, Mayor McGarry, for some brief comments on this, please.
Thank you. And interestingly, that just before here, I was a couple minutes late because I was actually videotaping greetings for Welcome Cambridge, second year in a row festival that we started last year in order to welcome our newcomers here in Cambridge. And of course, it's gone virtual. So we definitely are caring towards our most vulnerable. I know that as we're sort of setting our strategic plan over the next 3 years, there's no quick fixes, but I reflected on how welcoming we are to not only our vulnerable, but our new Canadians in Cambridge. And we're known for that. And we do need to continue some of these good news stories. A lot of what we are dealing with right now really takes everybody working together. And I think that when I was videotaping here, I've reflected on what's happened over this last year and how Cambridge citizens have come to help with the most vulnerable, neighbors looking after neighbors during the COVID crisis. But I want to just keep the eye on the ball, that we're doing a strategic plan that takes us for the next 3 years in the city of Cambridge. And yes, we've had a blip, as everybody has with COVID right now, but we do continue to be a caring community, and we should have our eye on the ball in the long term. We are continuing to work with all other levels of government for our most vulnerable citizens, and having discussions this morning with our local shelter and how they're caring for our citizens that are most vulnerable in this community has been awe-inspiring, to say the least, because they continue to do this work every day with the region and with our City of Cambridge staff. So I would say that although we have the sort of the COVID-19 pandemic in our sights right now, when we look long term, we really do have a lot of the pieces that we can connect to ensure that we have a really good, strong future for everybody. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I've got Councillor Wolf and then Councillor Hamilton, and then we'll pause and check in at that point. So go ahead, Councillor Wolf.
Thank you. Like many people have mentioned, I think affordable housing and supportive housing are two of our greatest needs. And as a municipality, it's not necessarily our mandate, since housing is more a regional department, but we need to do everything we can to encourage affordable housing in our city. Now, I sit on the Housing Cambridge board and chair the Affordable Housing Committee, and we have done things. We have incentives municipally for affordable housing to be built, and we're working on other initiatives, but we need strong support from the community. We don't need, I guess it's NIMBYism every time we try to place affordable housing in a new subdivision or an infill. We have to have people realize that everyone needs a place to live. And before we can tackle any social problem, including addiction, mental health, people need shelter. They can't begin to cope with any of the problems if they don't have a roof over their head. So that has to be one of the things that we tackle first.
Great, thanks very much for that. Over to you, Councillor Hamilton.
Yeah, I won't repeat what Councillor Wolf, Devine, or Reid have mentioned. I'm in full agreement with all of it. I just want to mention Cambridge, I think, has done a great job and could improve going into the future of creating those community or city level kind of pockets or hubs of interaction where any socioeconomic bracket, culture, religion, age can interact. So I'm thinking as a father of a toddler, like playgrounds, trails, community activities. These are the things right now, which obviously COVID has made very difficult, but they're those places where someone can leave their home, feel safe, feel secure, meet neighbors, get out and experience nature, and enjoy the beauty the city has to offer. And then when they return home, there's that real sense of safety, belonging, and community that's fostered by going out and interacting in those hubs. And so I think building off of a lot of the trails, playgrounds, parks that we have, increasing those in the future, investing in them, that's going to help foster that sense of security and community connection that I know really resonates with a lot of residents out there.
Great, thanks very much for that. Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Rebecca. And quickly, I'll just say that building on what Scott said, businesses look to our community or to any community to ensure that they have the amenities that they want for their employees. And when you look at what Cambridge has, we do have those things. We have the culture, we have the arts, we have the sports, we have the trails, all those things that people want to enjoy in their free time, and more their free time is important to them. And I think we have those amenities that attract businesses, that attract new citizens into our community, and that helps to make us the great place that we are. The other thing that I think is really important is, as a council, we need to be strong and cohesive in what we think is important for our community as well. And I think when you have a cohesive group and you have the emphasis on whatever it be, if it be housing or the social issues that we have, if we are strong and committed to those issues, that helps to emphasize that we are a strong, committed community working together for the best of our citizens or our constituents. So when the community sees us as a strong entity, they have confidence in us as we work together to solve problems and develop change within our community.
Absolutely, and that was certainly very much echoed in the feedback. We'll talk more about that on the public value side, but I would say that that's very consistent with what we heard. Thank you for it, folks. Let's move on a little bit. If you've got other comments on the belonging piece, by all means, put it in the chat, and also be thinking about what's not here, because if there are things that are missing, and I know you've already brought some of that up, but as you hear us walk through this, if there are things that are missing, by all means, let us know. The third one has a lot in it, and I appreciate the opportunity to be able to unpack it for you a little bit. This is really a pride of place question that is linked, therefore, to the other two, in the sense that people want to have somewhere that they can speak well of. They want to have somewhere where everyone has a place to live and be, so that businesses feel that people can, walk by and come in and feel safe doing that. So the initial, one of the messages that we heard was really to animate downtowns. And we had people speak to us about what that requires, including having people actively living there, with things to do there, that your downtown cores are busy in a sense, and trying to make them busier with animated life. And as Councillor Mann said earlier, with a really strong focus on the rivers and the beauty of the rivers that is a distinguishing feature for Cambridge, walkability and things to do would be linked with that. And that people who don't live walkable to those cores would have easy ways to get to them. And that therefore there would be a strong business emphasis in those local cores, that the local businesses would be your focus. There'd be an important taking care of crime and safety. That certainly came up very strongly in community input, probably more than from staff, for example, and more than from the social agencies with which we spoke. Along the lines of what Councillor Hamilton was just talking about, emphasizing multi-use, multi-generational spaces in the city and protecting your heritage assets. So this is a very large category. I would say that some later conversations called some of this into question and said, we don't need 3 downtowns, we need 1 downtown. And along the lines of the BIA that was mentioned earlier, what was the Galt BIA is now the Downtown Cambridge BIA, as far as I know. So things like that, where people are kind of going, do we want 3? Do we want 1? Nothing to argue with that cities need to be vibrant places, but I think specifically in your community, what do you want this revitalization portion of the strategy or this prosperity element to look like? So if you could put some of that into the chat or put your hand up, I'd love to hear some comments on this revitalization possibility and where to focus your energies. Thanks for the comments in the chat. We're looking at those. More people in the downtown. There are 3 downtowns, affordable housing in all areas of the city. Councillor Wolf.
Thank you. I think getting more people living downtown, and we're starting to see that with some of our intensification, will help all the downtowns. And we're, even advertising some of the good things that are happening downtown. One thing that happened this summer was we had a company did tubing from Blair to Galt, and over 7,000 people went down the river this summer. However, when you talk to people in the city, they didn't even know that. Now, most of those customers were from Toronto, but that kind of thing, we need to let the public know more about things that are happening. Right now at the old post office ID exchange, we have a video show on the side, and anyone that's seen it is incredibly impressed. But again, not enough people know what's happening. So we need to, this goes back, I guess, into communication, let people know about the good things that are happening in our downtown cores, and also realize that when we're looking at developers who want to develop in the downtown core, that we realize that we're trying to protect our heritage, and we need to do that. We also need to make room for more people to live here.
Great, thanks very much for that. I'm going to go to Councillor Devine and then Mayor McGarry. I'd love to hear from a couple of the councillors we haven't heard from yet, either in the chat or out loud if you have a chance. But for now, let's go to Councillor Devine and then Mayor McGarry.
Yes, thank you very much. And Councillor Wolf's correct on what she's saying, but we really, as a city and as Canadians, have to do some education on people. It's great to have all these big box stores. It's nice to have the Walmarts of the world for some people, but in a downtown core, if you have a store there, you have a restaurant there, you have a business there in the downtown core, and it's a retail operation, it's pretty simple. If you don't use it, you lose it. It will be gone. It will be absolutely gone. No one is going to stay in business for any length of time and lose money or not cover the costs. I mean, the Canadian dream is, you run your own business, et cetera, et cetera. But we've seen so many people that could have survived had they maybe had that 10 or 15% more business instead of people running to the big box stores and the corporate stores. So as a city, we need to do some education on residents, because I tell that to people like the area I'm in. I hear the bitching, this is we don't have this, we don't have that. I said, well, we had it, we did have it, but you lost it because you didn't use it. So don't whine to me. Thank you.
All right, thanks very much for that. I'll go to Mayor McGarry next. Please keep your comments brief because we've got the speaker list lining up.
Thank you. I'm really thrilled to see this. We've had some good news recently in the downtown Galt Core, where a landowner, a building owner, has sold a lot of the buildings now to our area developers who are really quite focused on core revitalization. Having more people live and work in the downtown cores is helpful. During COVID, I think there's a bigger focus on shopping local and being in our local areas to support those businesses, restaurants, as well as other shops. So I'm very hopeful now with a couple of very committed developers to bring back those buildings that have been vacant for years back into vibrant storefronts. We need to continue everything that we can do to bring people to live downtown. So although it is an issue with building more dense residential areas in our downtown cores, we need to do that to support higher order of public transit, as well as to support our local stores and businesses downtown. Thanks.
Thanks very much. We'll go to Councillor Adshade and then to Councillor Hamilton. Councillor Adshade, you're gradually getting darker and darker. I don't know if you got any lights we can.
Yeah, I should.
You're going to disappear completely.
I should put the light on here, but it reflects. The problem is where I'm sitting, it reflects off. But I'll put the light on it.
Go ahead.
But no, I just wanted to say, I think in this section, I think the three cores, you got to look at the three cores as a positive, not as a negative. I think there's room for all three of our cores, and that makes us unique. And I think it's a real positive in the city. And I think with intensification of the LRT, I think our core areas are really going to develop and thrive in the coming years. So I think that's a real positive. The other thing we have to look at is, as we talked about here, is beautifying the rivers. I know we talked about lighting up the rivers. I mean, the bridges. That's something I'd like to see us do in the future. Is I think looking at the pedestrian bridge lit up at night is beautiful. I think if we lit up all our bridges, that'd be a good way of beautifying the rivers of downtown.
Great. Thanks very much. Councillor Hamilton.
I'll be really quick, just echoing what everyone says pretty much. I mean, I think we all agree that densifying the cores is essential if we want to maintain and kind of reinvigorate Galt, Preston, and Hespeler, ensuring that those buildings maintain the heritage feel, ensuring that there's affordable housing, so you have every single socioeconomic bracket represented. You don't gentrify the cores, so it empties out into a concrete palace in the evenings. Like, that's essential. Proper transportation, like Councillor Adshade mentioned. Not just the LRT, but ensuring bus routes are functioning properly, that if someone has a disability, that they're able to get to and fro easily. And as Councillor Armetta pointed out in the chat, this is going to increase a lot of security in the downtown as well. I lived in downtown London, England for years, and I never felt unsafe because there's just a lot of people around all the time. So you just knew, well, nothing's going to happen. I'm in broad daylight. I'm surrounded by a lot of people. It's nighttime. It feels like it's broad daylight. So with that densification will come a boosted economy, a boosted sense of belonging, and I think it's very positive for the city going forth.
Right. Thanks very much for that. All right, we are almost at our fourth one, and then we're going to switch gears a little bit. So let's do our fourth one, and then we'll launch into a slightly different element of our feedback opportunity here. The last one has a little less detail in it at the moment, but should not be interpreted as any less important because of it. And we certainly do have more detailed comments underneath this, but I wanted to highlight some of the themes for you to show you the range. Environmental protection could be framed as a goal as climate change action in terms of prevention and mitigation. It could be framed in even more specific ways than that, flood management, or there may be other ways that you want to capture this. It might be sustainable development. It could be even green spaces as a much more specific way to look at it. And so we heard comments that range from, literally global level, broad stuff through to very specific local, get rid of single-use plastics kind of stuff. But in general, the categories were these: green spaces, lots about tree canopy, parks, trails, that kind of thing. Zooming way out, climate change and making that the absolute priority of the city. Net zero design as one element of that, but as an area that the city itself would be appropriate within your jurisdiction to major in. And then flood prevention, again, because of the rivers primarily. So these were the areas that people talked about. Would love to hear your thoughts on this, because I would say that this is an area that came up a lot, but has probably the greatest maybe diversity and lack of specificity in it. So any feedback you have would be most welcome. So we'll start with Councillor Wolf and look for comments in the chat as well. Thank you for them. Go ahead, Councillor Wolf.
Thank you. Well, the environment, as you said, is most probably the most important with climate change for our cities, for the world. Specifically for us, with our intensification, we're seeing more high-rise development. And because of that, I think we have to also increase our green space and park space so that those people living in high rises have some place to go. And I'm seeing too often a developer will give cash in lieu instead of park or green space. And I think we have to be very aware of that and make sure that we maintain the green space and in our city, and don't lose sight of how important that is. I mean, with COVID, where people were, stuck in an apartment building all day, getting out and walking and having some local green space is extremely important. Also, we have done at City Hall, ban single-use plastic. We've started to buy electric cars for our fleet. And I think anything that we can do in all our departments, we should be looking through an environmental lens.
Thanks for that. Mayor McGarry, I see your hand. I also see your comments in the chat. Did you have something to say out loud in addition to what's already in the chat?
Yes, because I'm not typing fast enough.
No, awesome. That's great. Chris is typing faster than all of us, so he's getting all of this for us.
Certainly, and I agree with all the comments so far. Paying attention to green spaces and climate change means that designing for the future is helpful. So absorbing paving stones, for instance, that actually absorb water then runoff. Parking lots now have solutions where it absorbs the water, prevents runoff. The way that you design your front driveways and front lawn areas in homes can help prevent runoff into the sewers by absorbing materials and new solutions. We are focused here in the city on trying to do everything that we can for our environment. We live alongside a river, but there's many solutions that we can look to when we're designing new spaces. Last thing I'll say is about heritage buildings. 30% of our landfill are demolished buildings. And so the greenest building is the one that's still standing. We need to continue to retain our heritage buildings and repurpose them rather than tear them down. And this city has done a good job at that. Certainly want to see more of that in the future. Last thing I'll say is along flood prevention. One of the ways that we prevent the flooding is to absorb the water from runoff. And there's all kinds of solutions that businesses, homeowners, and municipalities can do to prevent that runoff from getting into into our rivers and streams. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And thank you for those that are commenting in the chat. I see that there and I appreciate that. Councillor Mann.
Thanks, Rebecca. And very quickly, I'll just add to all the good suggestions and comments that have been made that we just approved our cycling master plan over the next 20 years. That was an $83 million initiative that was approved, and miles, or I guess it's kilometers now, I'm dating myself, but kilometers and kilometers of trail, whether it be on road or off road, have been identified to enhance our trails and the connectivity between our core areas so that people can get around safely and feel comfortable out on their bikes. So I think that's another way in which we are looking at how do we enhance our and protect our environment for the future, because we are the ones who have created the problem that exists today. What are we going to do to help future generations tomorrow? Thank
you very much. I appreciate that. folks, I'm going to speak to you about this public value piece for a moment, and then we're going to change it up and give you other ways to give us your input into how to shape this plan in more direct ways. But let me land on the public value piece just for a moment. There are two pieces to it. My apologies for the heavy text on the slide, but I wanted you to see it all at once. Two things, and read it in columns, please. The first part of this slide talks about the messaging we were hearing across the feedback. And I put the main thing right at the top, and that is the city seeing itself as an enabler, as an accelerant, as not as a barrier to people's innovation or people's movement or people's speed, but as an accelerant of the good stuff the community is doing. And I heard that from people in a really positive way in terms of saying, don't feel you have to take this on all yourself. It is the city more broadly, small C city, that needs to take responsibility for growing our city, not just the capital C corporation of the city. So these were some of the aspirational statements that came up. So the city, capital C, enables the community to step up, expects and facilitates meaningful engagement. It clears the path for residents, employers, and developers to drive COVID recovery. It acts boldly and acts transparently, driven by both data and vision. So a call there for evidence-based decision-making, but also vision, and the boldness piece was sticking with a plan over time and not sort of, again, against kind of the squeaky wheel leadership piece in terms of being distracted by the loudest voice or the next shiny thing. Forging strong partnerships in service of your mandate, being really open to new ways of doing things, and setting and meeting reasonable expectations so that specifically this plan aligns with the resources you have and what your staff and your other resources can reasonably deliver. So that was one piece of this public value lens. The other one, when speaking of lenses, was really about people saying, and I heard a couple of you say it today, we need to use this lens when we make decisions. Well, when we compiled all of that, there were 8 of them, which might be too many, but I wanted you to hear what they are so that if you want to comment on them, you can. Certainly this lens of positivity and hope and encouraging people to see a brighter future. A lens of equity and inclusion, that diversity and justice, inclusion and equity are non-negotiables in Cambridge. Maintaining a perspective that looks at the whole system and not just at one sector or one neighborhood or one person's application. What some people were calling legacy thinking, meaning creating a legacy into the future, not just looking backward, but long-term forward thinking that is informed by environmental stewardship, that your job is to make things easier for people to navigate, that you will be biased more toward action and follow through than more research and what some might see as not actually lots of talk and not a lot of action sometimes. And that this lens of building a city that is resilient and adaptable to whatever shocks might hit us, whether it is the next wave of COVID or something completely unpredictable, you are well positioned for that. So there's a lot here. And in some ways, this is the water in which you are swimming, right? I mean, this is partly the context, but it is also a place where a strategic priority or several could emerge, where you say, this might all be true, but therefore, here's where we need to focus for the next 3 years, because this is an area where we are either really strong and we want to leverage it, or an area of relative weakness that we need to shore up. So I'm curious what this makes you think. And I'd love to hear some brief comments in the chat before we move on. We're going to take this one a little shorter than we are the other ones, because I want to put our focus back on the content of what. This is a little bit on the how. So comments on how, very welcome. Councillor Mann, or is that from before? I don't know if I didn't delete you from before. Sorry, sir.
Sorry, that was from before.
Okay, my fault. Sorry. Does anyone want to comment on this at all? And sharing ideas. Councillor McGarry, or Mayor McGarry, sorry, go ahead.
That's okay, thank you. I think that the city can behave as an accelerant by using our online Engage platform. We've started town halls last year. We're switching to an online forum for town halls. That's where we can accept the community's suggestions. It's how we are able to sort of see what the priorities are. But there's so many good creative solutions from our individuals, our families, and our businesses in Cambridge that we can sort of act as sort of a place to accept this and continue to use our Engage platforms as well as our town halls in order to share ideas, get the community's priorities, and send them forward. But these are strong values of pretty well all of our citizens in what you've captured here.
So I'm
Thanks.
hearing that emphasis on community engagement. Thank you for that. Anything else? If you have anything else to say about this, I realize it reads a little bit as, you know, no one can take issue with this. What am I going to say? But if there are specific areas that you'd like to see emphasized, or you say, you know, we really need to lean in here, let me know. I should have said earlier, if you want to send individual messages, so you can do that online. If you want to send to a host or to me, you know, I realize that this is kind of an odd format in being both public and semi-private and private. It's a little bit strange, but you've got some options of how to get your feedback to us. What I have now for us is I've got 4 different ways to really engage with this material in a new way. So the first is this. So I'm going to give you 5 questions in a moment, one at a time. And all you're going to be asked to do is kind of rank things out of 10. If we actually wrote up a strategy in light of what you've seen so far tonight and heard, how close are we to what you think it should say? That's really what I'm trying to get at. So how are we going to do this? Well, if this were the framework for Cambridge's forthcoming strategic plan, my first question is, out of 10, is it the right size? And what I mean is, if I'd come to you with 90 priorities and a bunch of tactics underneath and all kinds of metrics for each, you would have said, whoa, 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 like too much, too much, too much. On the other hand, if I'd come to you with one thing, you'd be like, 3 years, one thing, not too impressive. We want a sense of magnitude. If we went with this kind of list, does it feel like about the right scale for the time and resources you have? So I'd like everyone on council to participate. Number 1 through 10, where 1 is, no, I don't think it's the right size. 10 is, it's perfect in terms of its size. If you want to have an explanatory comment, put it in the chat. But we're not going to talk about this. We're just going to score it in the chat. I've got 5 questions like this. Okay, so plunk this in the chat. Is it the right size? We can substitute things in and out, but we would keep it roughly this size if you tell us that this is about right.
Okay, how do we register it?
You put it in your chat.
Put it in the chat, okay.
You just put a number in the chat. If you want to make any comments about too big, too small, you know, sound like Goldilocks for a bit, it's fine. Love to know how to make it better. Would you like it more ambitious, less ambitious? You know, what are you thinking around that? I have a friend that anytime he asks people to vote on something out of 10, he tells them 7 is not allowed. So you're lucky I didn't make that rule, but the 7 helps us not know if it's too big or too small. So if you have any comments about if you want it tighter or more expansive, that would help us. In the meantime, I'm going to take us to our next question. Same thing. Same idea. Does this plan feel sufficiently targeted? So I've heard from your staff and from many of you by extension that you would like a plan that is targeted. And right now, this might feel too broad or not broad enough. So I'm wondering if it's targeted enough. Again, too big or too small would be helpful for us to know if you want to go tighter or broader. Especially if we're getting low numbers, we'd love to know, are you willing to commit to a tighter plan? Or are you saying, you know, these are good things, but there's 20 other things we wish were included here? I'm going to pause here for a sec while others are answering. I'm seeing lower numbers here. For those that are giving it a lower score, does it feel too targeted or not targeted enough? You can just tell me out loud. You want it more targeted than this, so we work harder to accomplish, and other people are saying can't get too targeted, right? Okay, focus on a broad range of sectors. Tighter because of those things that are listed there, okay. All right, thank you for this. Next one. Does it feel inspiring? If you went with these 4 priorities or something like them, does it feel like it would capture the imagination of your people? So I'm hearing an appetite for a tighter plan, which I have to say I'm very impressed by, because most municipalities are tempted to go the other way. So I'm excited to hear that, because it aligns with what we've been hearing people want. Does it feel inspiring? If you did a great job at it, would you feel like you did a great thing? If I can invite you to pick up the pace a little bit, we've got some other things. These are quick answers. There we go. 10 is really inspiring. 1 is uninspired. Yes. So high number is inspiring. Yeah. Thank you for those that answered that one. 2 more like this. 1 is, does it feel like it's within your sphere of control or influence? I don't want you looking at some ideas and saying, yeah, that's great, except it's all regional, or it's all provincial, or it's all something that local businesses have to do. Does it feel like something you can control? All right, seeing some good scores on that. That's encouraging. Thank you for it. And then finally, on this particular exercise, if you did this, would it create a city where people want to live and work? I mean, is it going to create the kind of city you want to build here? Does it take us down the right path? All right, thanks so much for that feedback. Please keep going there. All right, 3 more activities and we're done. Here's the next one. I'm curious, what would you add or remove from the plan? What do you say doesn't need it, it's still important, but not for this? Or you're like, where is XYZ I was expecting to see? So what would you add or remove in the plan that you'd like to suggest? Or maybe you have a suggestion about emphasis. Like, yeah, these are great, but let's really lean in here. So yeah, that's what I'd like to know. Emphasis, or things that are missing, or things that are extra that we should just take out. More focus on rivers and the environment I'm seeing. Thank you for that. Other comments here? We'll have time for a couple of oral comments if anyone wants to speak to this. I see Mayor McGarry's comment on tourism. I feel like I haven't necessarily done tourism quite the justice of what we heard. We did have good tourism participation in the expert panels. Interestingly, they said focus on making Cambridge amazing for the people who live here. That was the tourism recommendation. So we dug into that in a couple different contexts, because it wasn't what we were expecting people to say. And yet there was also another thread in the tourism line where people said, make us in Cambridge the day trip destination that makes you feel like you've gone to Europe for the day. You know, leverage the beauty of our rivers and our downtown and outdoor cafes and walkability and cobblestone streets, and make this like you've driven 20 minutes away and you've ended up in Paris. So those are the 2 threads. They don't need to be what we land on in a plan necessarily, but I wanted to give you a flavor of what we were hearing. All right, seeing some of your priorities there. Thank you. Councillor Devine first, and then Councillor Adshade.
Rebecca, I thought you covered that off quite well, actually. I wasn't going to talk about coming to Cambridge for a day to go to Europe, but we do have two beautiful rivers in the city. We need to work on the riverbanks, but there's a lot of things we could be doing there: canoeing, kayaking, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we got to maybe also take away some of the hidey holes that are there for the non-invited guests that we have. So that would work out well in both situations.
Okay, thanks very much. Councillor Wolf. Oh, sorry, Councillor Adshade and then Councillor Wolf.
Yeah, I think just looking at where we need to focus, I'd like to focus on the cores, the rivers, and tourism as my three main goals or main areas I think we should focus on.
Councillor Adshade, I missed the first one.
The core areas.
I thought you said the gorge, and I'm like,
oh, no, the core areas, rivers, and tourism. Yeah. Okay.
All right, terrific. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
Councillor Wolf.
Thank you. I think we need to concentrate on affordable housing and the COVID recovery plan. We've got so many businesses and people hurting, and we need to, in this next year for sure, put our emphasis on helping those people and businesses.
Thank you. Anybody else want to comment on this emphasis question or add or delete? Okay. So this next piece has a bit of a game to it. Imagine if we were standing together, I would give you $100 in Monopoly money and ask you to spend it across these priorities. But you might say, I wish there was a different category. I don't love these four. So you're actually being given 5 categories. You'll see 4 of them on the screen here. Sorry, just a sec, this one. Just a sec. There we go. So what I'd like you to do is in the chat, I should have numbered these. I apologize. Let's read them in the order that they came to in the first place. So you're reading left to right across the top and left to right across the bottom. Number 1 is the narrative. Number 2 is belonging. 3 is the cores, and 4 is the environment. 5 is any other category you wish were here but isn't. So if you had $100, you get to write in the chat how you would spend your $100 across those priorities. So if you would do it equally across all 4 shown here, it would say 1, 25, 2, 25, 3, 25, 4, 25, yes? So your numbers have to add up to 100, and that's all I want you to type in the chat, right? 1 through 4 or 1 through 5 with a number beside. Ideally, it would add up to 100. Go. So how much of a total of $100 would you put in each? Thanks very much for those that have answered that question. Just give you another moment for those we've not yet heard from. right. So I'm quickly doing math. Have we heard from everyone? If we haven't, I'll happily give you a little bit longer, but I can't tell if we've got everybody here. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. Getting some comments on that. All right. Have a look at what others are saying around the council ring if you were in your ring. If you want to make any other additional comments here, you're welcome to on this particular topic when you see the varying interpretation here of where we need to invest actual resources. Any further comments, you're welcome to make them now. All right, folks, our next and last activity is one that is perhaps reminiscent of the fact that I am wishing that I had seen the inside of an airport sometime in the last 7 months. So I want to take you on a bit of a trip. So sometimes one of the ways that we can sharpen our own thinking is by comparing ourselves to others and go, oh yeah, no, we're like them in these ways, but we're not like them in these other ways. And so I want to take you on a little bit of a travel log and then have a conversation about the ways in which you feel inspired or not by other world-class cities. So I don't know if you've been to any of these cities. I have not been to all of them, but let's have a look, because these cities by name came up in the consultation conversations that we had. And so I was intrigued by that. Vancouver came up. It came up not just in terms of lack of affordable housing. It actually came up in terms of what does it look like to be a community that embraces your most vulnerable and becomes a world leader in innovation for addressing mental health challenges, addictions, opioid crisis, etc. And so there were people that said, you know what, we could learn from cities like Vancouver in this. So that's one kind of pocket of inspiration. Another one was Austin. Austin, Texas is a bit of a hipster place, right? It's kind of this oasis of Democratic voters inside a sea of Texan Republicans. It has, you know, music festivals and good restaurants, and is known as kind of a cool vibe, music creative town. Brooklyn. Brooklyn is the city beside the big city, right? And in your case, I don't know, are you the city beside the bigger, well-known city of Toronto or the city beside Waterloo? I don't know. But it really is about owning being the neighbor to something. And maybe that inspires something in Cambridge, much like sort of a conscious second place Canada or New Zealand to a US or Australia might be. Amsterdam came up, rivers, bicycles. Don't know if you've ever been to Amsterdam, but the rivers, well, the canals there are absolutely central, and there are bicycles absolutely everywhere. What might that inspire Cambridge to become? Copenhagen is the one I know least about. Admittedly, we were supposed to go there in June and had to cancel that trip among others. But Copenhagen is a waterfront city as well. You can see even from this picture that it is a colorful, vibrant place that has all kinds of innovative things going on. They tend to be on the edge of trying new things. And it's got an innovation kind of mode to it, but also one where they take care of their people. And so I wonder what that might speak to you about. Elora, we know probably better, just up the road. It's become an absolutely hopping destination, due in part to its rivers, of course, but also due in part to its mill, which you also have. And so the way that the Elora mill has revitalized the vibrancy of the town of Elora is quite dramatic. What might it look like for you to leverage a similar geography and similar corporate citizen, frankly, in Pearl that might be interesting for you? And the other one, I should have added a picture that came up later in conversation, was Quebec City. European feel, Canadian, might have some things from which you can borrow. So I'm not suggesting you will become any of these, but I'm wondering if this is just one more angle into a conversation about how Cambridge wants to position itself over the next few years in light of who you want to become. And I would love to have a conversation for a few minutes about what this inspires for you. Councillor Mann, start us off.
Thanks, Rebecca. It's funny you say that, because when I think of Cambridge, I do think of Old Quebec City, or I think of Elora or St. Jacobs, because we have that quaint community vibe about us. And you have the river in each of the three cores. That's very unique. You have the little shopping center in downtown Hespeler, and all the little stores that are coming there. You have the mill in Galt, and all kinds of heritage value in Galt. And in Preston, we have Riverside Park, and we have the main street runs just parallel to the river. We have the opportunity to create a uniqueness that Cambridge will become. And you have to look further down the road. In 25 years or in 50 years, where will we be? Will we be part of the three cities, or the whatever we're going to be called, Waterloo region, instead of Kitchener, Waterloo, Cambridge? We were amalgamated, whether we wanted to be or not, back in 1973. Will we be amalgamated into a bigger urban area one day? How will we retain our uniqueness and our identity if or when that happens? So I think it's really important that we try to think about that, and how do we maintain our identity if that should happen. So that's where I think it's important that in a bigger, as Councillor Devine said earlier, you have all these communities within urban Toronto, and they maintain their identity. How does Cambridge do that if and when we become amalgamated into something bigger than we are?
Thanks very much for that. Over to Mayor McGarry, please.
Thank you. I think that the uniqueness of the rivers running through our cities begs river envy by many other surrounding municipalities, including Kitchener and Waterloo, who often look at our waterfronts down through our three different cores or core areas as a unique opportunity to really try and promote. Certainly, we have world-class trails systems through here. Because of the geography and the amenities here in Cambridge, it's what had Toyota settle here in 1986 or 1985, after it sort of chose between two different cities. We need to continue to focus on ourselves as a river city, make sure that our heritage and our downtown cores are well protected, because that's what brings people down here. Continue to provide a range of arts and cultural events that take advantage of our downtown core areas and our river areas. I think we've got a very unique setting that allows for all kinds of creativity, music scenes, a number of other different things, but certainly having the core areas, making sure that any type of river activities, as we've seen start to develop along our rivers, will certainly make sure that we have the uniqueness. And I can't emphasize enough, making sure that we retain our heritage downtown cores will really help us to be set apart from other cities. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Over to you, Councillor Devine.
Thank you. I see Cambridge as nothing more than a bunch of missed opportunities. Quite honestly, there's no other way to put it. There's all kinds of opportunity missed in brownfield sites. We tend to be a little bit afraid of environmental issues, and we have a responsibility. And and I see it as an opportunity. We have a responsibility to clean these up, whether it be through developers, whether it be through the city, the region, et cetera, et cetera. But we've done a good job of cleaning up the rivers, in the sense when I was young, which was a long time ago, the Speed River was nothing more than a waterway to run all the pollutants from down Speed River, from Guelph. Okay, I'm sorry, Rebecca, you live in Guelph, and as a young person, I would see soap suds coming off the waterfalls in Guelph Avenue, at what's called the Mill Pond now. And the rivers every day were a different color because of the textile mills along the rivers. They were. American Standard, they used to blow their excess white enamel, out in the river every day to empty the tank. So we've cleaned that up. We've done a great job of cleaning that up. But now we have to take the next step with the rivers and the trails and the environment. And I'd be quite honest with you, I just see it as a missed opportunity. And we have to really look at our built heritage that we have and the environmental heritage that we have. And I don't think we have to have more people living the corridors. I get that, but we don't want them jam-packed to the point that it's not going to be a livable situation.
Great, thanks very much for that. I've got Councillors Wolf, then Reed, then Hamilton in that order. To keep your comments brief, thanks for making them.
Thank you. I am inspired by Copenhagen, and I think we could do much of what they've done. It's an innovative city that takes care of all its citizens and is on the waterfront and has taken advantage of that. I would like to see Cambridge known as a creative city with a heart. And I think we can achieve that. I see, unlike Councillor Devine, I'm not so sure it's missed opportunities. I think we've done a lot of things right. And the amount of heritage that our city has preserved compared to other cities is testament to that. But we can do better. And I think we will.
Great, thanks very much for that. Over to you, Councillor Reed.
Thank you. Yes, I really felt we were on track until COVID hit us, and then we've kind of stalled a bit here because, like everyone else, we've had to deal with this pandemic, and and the safety and security of the people who live here has become our very first priority, as it should be. But I felt that the back to the river that we were doing, and that the things that we had planned and haven't been able to carry out are very good plans that we could get back to. And some of them have been mentioned. I think Councillor Adshade mentioned the lighting up of the bridges and things like that that make us unique, and because we are very unique. And that makes me think of Elora. And Elora, I've always felt that if our cores went in for specialty shops and restaurants even more than they are now, that would make them more attractive to tourism and also for our own people. I know that people have said to me the closing of the Hespeler downtown over the summer. People had mentioned to me that it was just wonderful because they walked down there and they spent the afternoon there, and the restaurants were open and they could walk easily because there was no traffic. So I think the things that we do like that. Amsterdam is a city that I just love, and if we could emulate any of the things of Amsterdam that they have, certainly we're trying with our bicycle trails. And I think that as we continue with our bicycle master plan, more and more and more people will want to use those trails and will become a part of it. And as we connect our city, and if we have that view of connecting our cores and connecting our city, then that sense of belonging is going to be enhanced. And I think that we become an even better city. So I'm looking forward to the future in really good ways. And I think that we maybe have to go a little more slowly because of COVID and because of the opioid crisis, but we shouldn't stop. We need to envision, and we need to keep on track with that vision. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to pass it over to Councillor Hamilton, and then Mayor McGarry, I'll pass it back to you to close off because I understand you've got some other business that needs to be wrapped up at the end of the evening. So Councillor Hamilton, over to you first.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. And I'll be quick. I think if we look at all of those cities, what they all have in common is that lots of people from different countries want to go there. They're all tourist hotspots, right? So what is it that makes them a tourist hotspot? It's all these qualities that we're identifying, right? Like they're creative, they've preserved their history, there's cobblestones everywhere, there's new buildings intermingled with that, and they have heart, right? Places like Copenhagen, like Amsterdam, they make sure that people that are struggling are in need are taken care of. They have accessibility, right? Like you live in Guelph, you have a GO train. So the amount of people coming in from Toronto is huge, and that boosts the tourism, it boosts the livability, it boosts people moving around from one place to another. I think Cambridge can have that through rail, through bus, through the 401, through bikes along the rivers. I think Councillor Devine, I partially agree with. I think there are always missed opportunities, but I think hindsight is, it's always 2020. We have perfect vision when we look in the past, and I'm more of a recent addition to Cambridge. We moved here because we see the potential that's still there. It's inherent in the town. So many people see that, and now it's a matter of maybe not choosing a specific city, but identifying the future that we want to build, because now we have the potential to do that. So I think there's a ton of opportunity that we're all identifying right now.
Thanks for that. And thanks to all of you for giving us a couple of hours of your input. We appreciate your collective wisdom. We need your input on this. We need your shared input on this. And I think it's helpful for you to hear what your fellow councillors are thinking about it as well. I know that the staff and Chris and I really do appreciate your input. So we'll gather that all up and continue to feed it into the process. We're having a similar conversation to this later this week. And we'll, keep the process moving. So you'll be hearing back from this project in December. So Mayor McGarry, over to you to wrap up the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. And I want to really, just on behalf of council and staff in the city of Cambridge, thank yourself and Chris so much for the work that you've done to get us here, to recognize our incredible staff that have been working hard on this plan. Certainly Brooke Lambert, Nicole Drake, all of city staff that have gotten to this point. And I can't help saying, personally, I'm always inspired when I look at our strategic plan. We have so many fantastic amenities here in the city of Cambridge, and it's trying to sort of encapture all of the elements, not only from our public and our staff, but certainly city council, who are all tied into this city in ways that are pretty unique. And it's an incredible privilege to be here with everybody in order to really look to our future. And I'm just going to say it out loud. Our future is incredibly bright. We have so many wonderful amenities that we can focus on here, just from our natural heritage, rivers, our downtown cores, our trail system, our natural heritage, but we're also a unique city with 3 downtown cores plus the village of Blair that has incredible architecture that has really helped to spawn other creative industries such as film and TV. I could go on at length, but I just wanted to capture the enthusiasm that I feel myself from coming to this venture, and also really hearing my council colleagues looking into the future and trying to design a city that's going to work for all of us. So again, on behalf of myself and City Council, I want to thank you for the work that you're doing so far, and I look forward to the next time that we can spend time here.
Thank you.
Now I get to the business portion. So City Council, we have to bring our heads back into the here and now and go forward with the confirmatory bylaw. So Councillor Adshade, I see that you've unmuted. You have the confirmatory bylaw, so please read it in its entirety.
Thanks, Your Worship. It's moved by myself and second by Councillor Hamilton, the confirmatory bylaw 20-098, being a bylaw of the City of Cambridge to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the City of Cambridge at its council workshop held on the 26th day of October 2020, passed and enacted this 26th day of October 2020.
Thank you. Does Council have any comments at this point? Seeing none, I think we're ready now for our clerk to call for the vote. Madam Clerk?
Councillor Adshade.
In favor?
Councillor Devine.
Aye.
Councillor Mehta.
In favor.
Councillor Mann.
In favor?
Councillor Hamilton.
In favor?
Councillor Reid.
In favor?
Councillor Wolf.
In favor?
Mayor McGarry.
In favor.
And that carries.
Thanks, everyone. And again, thank you for everybody joining us tonight. So now we are going on to the close of the meeting. And Councillor Urmeta, you have this motion. Please read it in its entirety. Councillor Urmeta.
Thank you, Your Worship. Can I get the clerk to read that, please? I don't have it with me. Sorry.
Absolutely. Madam Clerk.
That the council workshop does now adjourn at 5:53 p.m. Moved by Councillor Mehta, seconded by Councillor Reid.
Thank you. And I'll now call Madam Clerk for the vote. Madam Clerk.
Councillor Adshade.
In favor? Sorry.
Councillor Devine.
All right.
Councillor Mehta.
In favor?
Councillor Hamilton.
In favor?
Councillor Mann.
In favor?
Councillor Reid.
In favor?
Councillor Wolf.
In favor?
Mayor McGarry.
In favor.
And that carries.
Thank you very much. And that concludes our meeting for this evening. Thanks all for joining us this evening. And on behalf of Cambridge City Council, we will remind you to remain physically distanced, wash your hands, and wear a mask when you're out. Thanks, everybody. Stay safe.